this episode of Dentside Depot, we are going to go over every single possible engine that you could get in 1979 on full-size Ford trucks. So stay tuned. We got some fun stuff going on today, and enjoy the episode. And our first engine that you could get in 1979, being the smallest, is the Ford 300 straight six. And this particular engine definitely has a cult following because of how absolutely unbreakable it is. The reason it's so unbreakable is it has straight gears for the camshaft and the crank, so there's no timing chain on it. The overall design of a six-cylinder obviously is advantageous because they don't knock around as much, etc. Flat tappets, but this engine is definitely completely unbreakable. This one that we got right here is still essentially bone stock from '79. It's never been apart. I have put a dual plane manifold on it, of course, with true dual exhaust and the Holley carburetor. I think it's the 400 CFM is what I have on it. It's the little guy, and that's all I did to this engine, really. And it's been sitting, it sat for 30 years before I even touched it. The oil was so bad in it, it was like water. So let's go ahead and give this bad boy a cold start here. You could get the 300 in everything from F100 through F350 in two-wheel drive or four-wheel drive, whatever you wanted. It was the only engine that was available in all the different option categories for all different size trucks. And they even put these bad boys in the F600s and 800s, the dump trucks and everything else, because they are just so unbreakable and they make so much torque. So let's see how nice this one starts here today. And we have a 4-speed manual on this truck. Yeah, and that's why these engines are just unstoppable. That's a true cold start on this one. It's so much fun to get on this thing. It's like a little bucket of bees. If you're interested in this truck, I'll put the link below for when I first got it about a year ago and did all the initial work on it. But the 300 is definitely legendary in the '79 Ford truck lineup. So let's get to our next one. And next up on our engine list today is the second smallest engine that you could get in '79. And that is the infamous and awesome Ford 302 small block. And the 302, interestingly enough, only ever came in the two-wheel drive trucks. It's kind of bizarre that they didn't put them in the F-150 4x4s, but you could get these in F-100, 150, 250, and I don't think 350, but 250 two-wheel drive definitely. I'd have to double check on 350 two-wheel drive. I don't think that was an option for the 350 two-wheel drives, but only in the two-wheel drive trucks, which is kind of strange considering how popular and how good this engine really was. So let's give it a start up here and see how this one sounds. This particular one is bone stock 1979 original. The only modifications that it has is a mid-rise or high-rise intake, an Edelbrock carb. It has an old set of headers that I got used, and it has a GM power steering pump in the front. Or actually, I think that one's off an Econoline van, one or the other. But let's start this bad boy up and see how she sounds here today. All right, so great running, great sounding engine. It does have a little bit of a valve leak. I think the umbrella seals are bad on it, so when it sits overnight, it gets a little smoky in the morning for about a minute, and then it's all good. I mean, not bad enough that I would bother pulling the heads off of it because it runs so darn good. This truck has also been Crown Vic swapped, if you haven't noticed, of course. Let's check out what the exhaust sounds like. I don't even know what kind of buffers they are. I got them on a truck used. Actually, I think this exhaust came off of Junior Mint's truck. And we just threw it on there, and it sounds great. I had to do it up a little bit with a little bit of stainless to make it a little nicer, but besides that, overall really good. 302 is an awesome engine. The other great thing about the 302 compared to the engines we're going to talk about next is that this one by far got the best fuel mileage of all the V8s. It's not even close. This one was absolutely the best. Pops drove a 302 truck back in the day, and then he also had an 80s truck with a 460 in it, and there, or excuse me, a 351 in it. And even the difference between those two was significant as far as fuel mileage is concerned. And this engine runs great. I believe it to be 85,000 original miles. Service sticker still on the valve cover. 302 is definitely an epic part of the 79 Ford lineup and all 6th-gen trucks. Next up, we have the 351M, what's typically called the 351 modified. Not a Windsor, but actually pretty close to a Cleveland with a different bell pattern on the back. Now, the 351 was also available in all of the different cab sizes. You could get these in the 2-wheel drive trucks, including F100, and they would come in the 4-wheel drive trucks as well, which was very common. The F250s and F350s most commonly saw these engines. So some people love these engines, a lot of people don't. They really benefit from headers, carburetor, a higher mid-rise intake, and obviously a camshaft changeout really brings these to life, because they were not very good from the factory. Another problem with these particular engines is the timing chain stretch almost immediately, and you really need to put on something like the Edelbrock aftermarket timing chain. That really helps these guys out a lot. And that brings us right over to the Ford 400, which is essentially the same thing as the 351M. They just have a different bore and stroke. That's pretty much the only difference between the two. A lot of people call this one a 400M. That's not correct. It's just a 400. These particular engines you can get in everything except the F100. So you could get them in an F150 2-wheel drive truck, or you could get them in an F350 4x4 all the way up. So these are pretty much come in everything that you wanted. Same exact things as the 351M, the same concerns, the same requirements to make better power and everything else on. And I will say the 351M and the 400 are both absolutely horrible on gas. They are horrific. I get about 8 to 9 miles to the gallon. With the 3-speed transmission, they are not good on gas whatsoever. But they do always start and they do always run, pretty much. I mean, they really are tank engines for the most part. They're just terribly inefficient, and they make absolutely no power in stock form. But regardless, they were a very critical part of the lineup for 1979. All right, so before we go to our last engine for the day, I do want to go over one other engine here, and that is the 351 Windsor. You could not get a 351 Windsor in any 6th-gen Ford. I really don't understand why they didn't offer this engine, particularly in the 2-wheel drive trucks. It doesn't really make much sense. You can identify a 351 Windsor because they will have a intake with coolant in it, and they will have more bolts on the intake. I think it's 16 compared to 12 for a 302. Essentially just a bigger 302 with these engines. This one's obviously been swapped with the 351 Windsor. It would have made a lot of sense to put these engines in, but they didn't. So with that being said, let's get to our last engine of the day, being the big block 460. Here we go. All right, so next up we got the big monster 460, and I have my resident expert Steve back with me here today. Thank you, Steve-O. So Steve, let's get the first thing out of the way here, and that is the myth, the legend that everyone says my 4x4 truck came with the 460 in 1979. True or false?
No chance.
No chance.
Unless it was 2-wheel drive.
Unless it was 2-wheel drive. All right, so Steve, tell us what's done to this engine.
Okay, this is a 460, 30 over. Has a mild hydraulic roller cam in it. It's got a little bit of head work done to it. Runs great, just bad on gas.
Yep, like they all are. All right, let's take this beast for a spin. All right, time to unleash the beast. Here we go. Nice and gentle. Big block power.
I just used about $5 a gas.
All right, well listen, I hope you enjoyed this episode of Dentside Depot, going over all the engines. And no, you could not get a 460 from the factory in a 4x4 truck with 6 gens. Remember to like and subscribe, and we'll see you in the next episode.